Welcome to the Extraordinary Podcast, where we identify God's uncommon work in common life. Recognizing God's work requires intentionality, but articulating it motivates and inspires. Don't forget to subscribe to never miss an episode. In today's episode, I have a conversation with Andrew Oldfield, where he shares about his coming to know Jesus moments that included his time in the military, his time at school in Bethel, Indiana, as well as his time as hospital chaplain. So let's get into the conversation with Andrew. Andrew, thank you for being a guest on the podcast. We appreciate you taking the time to share your story and kind of God's direction in your life. So thank you for being here today.
Yeah, thank you.
As we begin, can you share a little bit about your church background and what the church means to you?
Yeah, so I grew up in a Catholic church. Actually, my parents were Catholic, but they weren't like strong Catholics. They weren't practicing Catholics, so we called them Creasters. We went to church on Christmas and Easter, and I really saw church as this barrier to present opening. Like it was like this, oh, I gotta go and I gotta go sit through this service, a boring service, never got anything out of it, and they took me to Sunday school. I was confirmed in the church. I was baptized in the church. And eventually I just kind of walked away from it. I just kind of walked from the church. And it wasn't until like middle school I met my friend Bill. And he started trying to get me to come to church. But I always associated church with this boring, mundane ritual. And I'm like, no way. There's no way I'm going back to church with you, man. And it's what I said in my head. And so he kept on bugging me, so I said, fine, I'll just go with you. And so it was in junior in high school, I started going with him to this youth group at Oak Street Baptist Church in here in Burlington. And I got to church, and I was like, wow, they're having fun. They're playing rock music, and they're just playing these really cool games, and I never thought church could be like this. And so I started going more and more and more, and eventually gave my life to the Lord after, about senior year in high school. So that's kind of my growing up with the church and how I've interacted with it. But since then, I've obviously dabbled in different denominations like Pentecostal and Nazarene, and I went to a missionary college, so I was missionary for a while too. So
now, you gave your life to Jesus your senior year of high school. Mm-hmm. Is that, would you say, when you got serious about Jesus? So, or can you explain when did you really get serious about Jesus?
Yeah, I think I dove into it like with both feet. But I think a really good time mark for when I really got serious about Jesus is when I went to Bethel College. I think it was my freshman year. I just really felt connected with the Lord. I felt I had really good friends to support me and really encourage me in my faith, and really good guy friends that really encouraged me in my faith. And chapel was amazing. We always had we sat together, we ate together, we did everything together, and we formed this like small little community of believers. And I really felt that was probably the pinnacle, if I could say pinnacle, of my Christian faith, where I felt the deepest with Jesus and started really getting serious about college, about my call with Jesus. I went to college just so, because I went to college, I went to Bethel thinking I would be either an actor or something with art, something in those two lines. But then I got there, and I'd always felt I had a calling to be a chaplain, but this didn't really come to fruition until I started going to Bethel.
So had you served in the military as well?
Right.
When did the Bethel military? When did all that happen?
Sure. So my military history starts in '97. I went to basic training in '97. As a combat engineer and in the National Guard unit here in town, which was over by the airport at the time. And so I was hoping to get as a chaplain assistant. Like when I had them come to my house, I thought, this is what I'm doing. But they sent me to engineer school, and I had no idea. And so I was like, okay, I guess I'm an engineer now. And so that military experience started there. And so... What was your question again? Were you in the military then you went to Bethel? Is that how the timeline works? Yeah. So that I switched MOSs so I could go out to Bethel. Like when I got to Bethel, I had to switch MOSs because there was no engineer battalions near where I was at. So I switched MOSs, became a truck driver, And so I did my freshman year at Bethel, and then the following year I was in California with a friend, and then I got called overseas. So that sophomore year I was overseas. So I spent a year away from college.
And you said you were in the military for 9 years.
Yeah.
And your hope was to be a chaplain's assistant. That was your goal going into it, but they had other plans for you.
Yeah.
So there's a lot to unpack here, and I'm going to come back here. So one of the things you mentioned about your time in church when you were in high school is the fun you had, the music, and all that is great. And I don't think anybody would say, well, I mean, having music that appeals to whatever generation, we should do that, right?
Right.
But so many times we talk about having the right music and having fun events, but things don't stick. And the faith doesn't necessarily stick. There are many that come for a good time and then just go do their own thing or walk away.
Yeah.
Why did it stick for you?
I think it stuck for me because, one, I saw people living out their faith that were of my generation. Like, I saw these young people living out their faith. We were going on mission trips. We were doing things in the church. We were welcome to the church during service hours. We were excited about Jesus. And then I had other people come alongside me that mentored me, women and men, that both poured into my life. In fact, Sue Peterson, still in town. I ran into her the other day when I came back from, I moved back here. We were going out to eat with my sister and my dad, and I ran into her, and I just, this welling of love for her came back up, and I'm like, she really poured into my life. And there were so many people, like my pastor, Pastor Presley was really key in my development, and Pastor Stark, and all these people just poured into my life, and they showed me what it was like to live for Jesus, and got me involved in the church, got me integrated, and so I guess it stuck for that way. It stuck. Yeah,
well, thank you for sharing that. I was just that's something that every church, I think, throughout history has dealt with of once when someone becomes an adult of do they stick with Jesus or do they go explore whatever that may be. And so thank you for sharing that. Now you served in the military for 9 years. Can you share some of the lessons you learned or some of the experiences that have helped shape you and prepared you for the next step?
Yeah. Military is a hard life being a Christian. It's really hard. Especially as an engineer, they had unsavory things laying around, and they did unsavory things when they weren't out in the field doing things. And so being a Christian is extremely hard and lonely in the military, at least my experience is. But I still remember these guys today. I think the turning point, or when I started really getting, when I started integrating Jesus with my military service, was when I was overseas. And I went overseas as a truck driver, and so what we would do is we would haul fuel along these roads and up to Baghdad and up to to Crete and stuff like that, and we would haul fuel up and down these really dangerous roads. And before we get on these roads, we'd have a convoy briefing, and they'd say to us, well, this convoy before you had napalm thrown at them, they got small arms fire, and so we're going to go tonight, and we're going to do this thing. And so you're thinking, wow, tonight could be my last night on earth, like really scared. But then, you're driving on the road and there's nothing you can do. You're driving this truck, and so it's like complete surrender to Jesus. And, I think that was the moment I'm like, yeah, Jesus has got me. I don't have anything I can't fear anything because I have no control over my life. And so it was like this moment of like, aha, I surrender to you, Jesus. I surrender all that I am, all that I do. And you got me. You've got me. Regardless if I die today or if I don't die today, you've got me, and I trust you. So it's kind of like forcing me to force me into this wilderness experience, so.
I think that's a powerful perspective because, and obviously that's an extreme scenario that someone who's never been on the battlefield doesn't really have the same experiences in their own life, doesn't have the same danger that they face, but yet we can still have woe is me moments of why is Jesus abandoning me or something like that. But that moment was just I think probably a lesson you're never going to forget.
Yes.
That going back and forth in that convoy
Yeah.
is a tangible way of trusting Jesus.
Yeah, I can't say that I never did have a woe is me moment over there. I mean, there's always those times where I was like, man, Lord, what are you doing to me, man? And but he always brought me back around because it tested my faith to see, am I really a follower of Christ? Am I really going to come back to the faith? And I really realized that there's nothing else out there except for my faith. I can't trust myself. I can't trust anybody else. I can't trust the military. I can't trust my gun. I can't trust my truck. I can trust Jesus because he's always consistent. Mm-hmm. And so, like, I was like, well, I don't like you, what you're doing to me right now, but I have to trust you because you're the only one that's really consistently there for me. So,
yeah. Well, that's powerful and challenging, and then those who are listening, I hope will resonate with what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Now, you are a chaplain now in the hospital system. Can you share your call to chaplaincy?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of my favorite stories, actually. So I was in the military in '97. So I went into the military as a Christian and really had a deep love for Christ when I got in. Thought I would be a chaplain. So we're on bivouac. We're on our little camping trip, so to speak, and we're going up this large hill. And this is the first time I've ever been away from home for more than a month or so, and these guys are yelling at you. You walk off this cattle truck, you're stuffed in here, it's hot, you got all this gear on you, and they're yelling at you, and you're like, what did I just do to myself? What do I just do? And so I was at a low emotional spot at this point, and this chaplain comes out, and he starts talking to us, and I know this is really cheesy, but like the clouds opened up and the light shined down on me. I'm like, Lord's like, I want you to do this, and I really felt like a calling to help people in their darkest hour. And I felt like that's what the chaplain was doing for me at that moment, like really kind of showing me, I'm in a dark spot, but he showed up with us on bivouac and he came out and talked to us. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to be there for people. I want to help the hurting and dying, and wherever you got me going, Lord, I'm all in. But so that was my calling to be a chaplain. Obviously, I ran from that for a long time. For 10 years, I ran from the Lord, like Jonah, that completely ran from him. And it was until 2017, I was like, I'm all in. I'm just going to do it.
So okay. And then what did you do? What was your job before you actually pursued chaplaincy?
Oh, man. I worked at Bethel College for 9 years as a maintenance guy and groundskeeper. Okay. Then after that, it was miscellaneous jobs here and there, on and off a lot. So
then you accepted your call, you pursued it in you said 2017, and became a chaplain at a local hospital.
Yeah, so I did my residency in Kokomo, Indiana, and then after my residency, I got 2 part-time jobs, one at St. Joseph Regional Medical Center, and then one at Elkhart General. So I was doing two chaplain jobs to make one full chaplain job, and then I was working a 3rd job at Home Depot. So that's where I started doing my chaplain work.
Now, one of the things about, I think everybody has an idea of what a chaplain is or what a chaplain does. Can you share some of your responsibilities and what that looks like? Because I'm sure there are a lot of misconceptions.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions. In fact, when I walk into a room, they're like, don't need to be preached to today, or I walk in and they say, the first thing they say is, well, I go to church, So a chaplain's job basically is to be there for people who are depressed, who are sad, suicidal, be there for families who are grieving a loss of a loved one. Well, I'm there for every code, every death. I'm there for traumas. I'm there just to come alongside the people who just seem to be destitute, to come alongside them and give them support the best way I know how. There's no proselytizing as a chaplain. I don't know if anybody knows that, but you're not allowed to preach Jesus unless they ask you. So you can't walk into a room and say, hey, I think you need to know Jesus today. Unless they ask you, you can't do that. But I always find that you can show Jesus through your hands and feet and through your words of comfort and stuff like that. So that's just kind of the tip of the iceberg what a chaplain does. I mean, I'm a notary at the hospital, so I notarize documents. I do advanced directives. I counsel my staff. I'm a staff child. I minister to the staff as well as patients and families. So
I think you're the fact that you can't preach or prophesize is something I think everybody's like, oh well, yeah, that makes sense, but we forget about it in the sense of you are a member of the clergy, but on some levels you can't talk about your faith,
right,
which is real awkward at times.
Yes.
And many people work in environments that either don't allow you to talk about your faith or really discourage it. So many of the secular vocations can understand and empathize with what you're going through, but you are a spiritual caregiver who is very limited on the spiritual content you can discuss.
Yeah.
That's interesting. But you enjoy chaplaincy?
I do. Going back to what you had said earlier, I'm also a chaplain that will connect people to their faith group. So if there's a Sikh that comes in, or if there's someone who's Jewish and wants a certain meal or needs to have something done, I minister to all faiths, but I don't practice all faiths. So it's like I have to connect them somehow, or find out what's important to them and connect them somehow that way. But yeah, I really enjoy being a chaplain. I can't see myself doing anything for the rest of my life. So. Unless Jesus calls me.
Well, yeah, of course. Now, are there ways that people can support your work as a chaplain?
That's a good question. I don't know. I guess prayer. I guess they can pray. Just because there's some days that are really tough. The last couple of weeks have been really tough, and so, just coming alongside and just let me know that you're praying for me and stuff like that, because a lot of the stuff I can't talk about because it's private, patient confidentiality. I can't talk about a lot of things, and so I carry a lot of things, and so it can be pretty burdensome, but I still wouldn't change it.
When people ask me what's one thing that surprised you as a pastor, and one of the things I joke about is how open people are when they're in a hospital gown, and sometimes they share things, but also they're not. I've had experiences where they're willing to show you where the bruise or the cut is.
Yep.
And so I share that jokingly, but also recognizing that in those moments you are the safe person for them. That there are fantastic nurses and other medical staff that don't always have the time to be there for the patient in that way, which is where you come in.
Absolutely. To
allow the medical teams to do the medical treatment, so you can help with the emotional, mental, spiritual side of things. But it takes a toll, as you mentioned. So thank you for sharing. I think it's important for people to recognize that, and I hope people do pray for you. How many chaplains are at the hospital?
We have 2 full-time chaplains right now. We're looking for PRNs, so if you know anybody out there, shameless plug. But yeah, we have just 2 full-time chaplains,
which is not very many for the size of the hospital.
It's actually quite sufficient.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, I mean, we carry on call shifts, which is kind of the bummer, but we don't really get called in a lot. I mean, there's very rarely do we get something coming in, but me and Amanda, we both work the hospital together, and we find plenty of work just for 2 of us. And sometimes some days are light, some days are heavy, and we split the work up. But it's really opened up a lot of ministry opportunities for both of us to really stretch ourselves as chaplains at work. We were able to actually visit units that we weren't visiting before, and we were able to do more things for the staff. We're able to think about ways we can minister to the hospital and to the community as a whole, but in a deeper way. Because there's more work, there's more people for the work now, so, which is really cool.
Yeah,
I like that.
That's cool. Because you've shared with me about trying to be a service for the community and find ways to connect the churches to what you're doing.
Right.
And because even though you can't preach Jesus, you can be the connecting point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, transitioning back a little bit to the church, and as I said, you're a member of the clergy, and and the church has its flaws. I think everybody can say that. But I'm just curious, from your perspective, what about the church in general, is giving you hope or encouragement right now?
Well, I think that the most encouraging thing is that we're not backing down in a time where being a Christian is a little bit more frowned upon than it was like in the 50s, 60s, 70s. This is a time that the world needs the church the most, and we're not backing down. We're not going anywhere. And I think that's probably the most encouraging thing. There's a lot of things have changed so much. People have changed, and they're saying things that I didn't think are possible, like that, science isn't real and stuff like that. And so the church is, what I really want to encourage the church to do is just continue to preach the love of Jesus and to preach the word, but with kindness, be the salt of the earth, and so to speak. And I think that will go a long way with people. And
And I think there's wisdom in that. You think of Jesus' ministry, and the only time he really talked about Rome was, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and give to God what is God. There's a couple other times where you could say, but for the most part, Jesus didn't get involved in politics. He got involved with the life transformation of the individual, and so when we can think of not the things we disagree with, or the passions about what should or shouldn't be from a political standpoint, if we focus on the individual, then that can change things one at a time. So I think that's a challenging word for you today. This has been a fun and I think eye-opening conversation for me. Just getting into the life of chaplaincy and even though it wasn't, we're not here for hours, but it's given me a greater awareness of your calling and what that means. But is there anything else you'd like to share? Anything we didn't cover that you just think would be great to share today?
Well, I am a minister in the missionary church. I am ordained or licensed to preach and to marry people and stuff like that in the missionary church. So that's where I kind of have my ordination through my licensure. But it's been an interesting transition coming to the Nazarene Church, and I guess I really want to say, this just came into my mind, is that your church is doing such a wonderful job. The moment I walked through the door, people just greeted me. People were just like, I don't think they knew how not to greet people. The love they poured out onto me when I first came in this church was amazing. I've never seen it before in a church. And so I just want to give this church and you and your congregation kudos to the amount of love you pour out into people. And you showed up to move me into my house, and those different things that you've done have really shown me that this is an amazing church. It's where I belong, so...
I agree with you. There are a lot of amazing people here, and I wasn't trying to bait you into giving us props, but it's ministering, regardless of your context, has its challenges, but man, it's rewarding, and just you get to experience Jesus in a way that many don't get to, and so I don't know how you feel when you are in a room when you can't really talk about Jesus, but you're being Jesus, and it can be emotionally difficult, but extremely fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that's kind of how I feel about the church. It when you serve Jesus in a vocational ministry, it can take energy and I don't want to downplay that, but. And we talk about being filled with the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit, it never runs out.
Yes.
And so, anyway, that's kind of. But we appreciate you sharing today. I've enjoyed getting to know you. I look forward to getting to know you more, and just doing ministry with you and serving Jesus in our community. Yeah. So thank you for being a guest on our podcast and sharing with us today. We appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this podcast. Be on the lookout for how God does uncommon work in common life. And please subscribe to never miss an episode.